started here in just a minute. Appreciate your patience waiting. And back to the life of Joseph. Jacob meets up with his family and heads down to Egypt. So that's where we're at today. Hang in there. We'll get started in just a second.
It's not on.
Oh, here. Oh, I muted it. There you go. Sorry. I saw the green light. Then it went red. So. All right, well, hey, we are already at 9:30, so why don't we get rolling and we'll let come in who comes in, and I'm going to unplug from here. How do you like that? Next week, I'll bring an HDMI cord. There's one here. We can just plug it straight in. There we go. Hey, it's just me this morning. I'm going to try to sit. How you guys? How are you? Oh, hanging in there. Yeah. God's grace. God's amazing grace. I'm not going to be able to show anything up here, so that's a good question. But it's one of those things. It always works. You turn it on this morning, it doesn't work. So I'm just reading Bible, though. I don't have any slides to show you. I like to use slides for teaching, but these Sunday mornings, I'm just reading a lot of Bible since we're in this longer section. So I'm going to be in Genesis chapter 46. If you have a Bible or you have a phone, and don't feel bad if you use your phone. My phone is also my Bible. So, but Genesis 46, yeah. Genesis chapter 46. Mm-hmm. Oh, thanks. Yeah. We'll turn that off there so it's not in the background and confusing us. So, yeah. Yeah. Some mornings you have to breathe that sigh of relief before you begin. That sigh of just pause for a minute. So, yeah, why don't we pray and let's roll. Let's just roll on in our Bible story. So, hey, good morning. Good morning. Yeah. Lord, thanks this morning for the privilege we have of living and breathing and being alive. And we thank you that as believers, we are alive in Jesus. We thank you and praise you for enlightening us to all that we needed. We thank you for providing all that we needed. And we thank you that by faith in your Son, his death and resurrection, it opens up for us the possibility, well, more than that. It opens up for us the reality of being forgiven, of being cleansed and right with you, of being justified, of being set apart to you, of having a new purpose, a new vision to live for. We come to you with a lot of different kinds of distractions, whether they're personal or just our concerns for things in the world. And we don't want to live sort of a strange life that doesn't acknowledge our own world we're living in, the needs we have. At the same time, we don't want to be so absorbed in that we get pulled down. We want to come to you today by faith in the name of Jesus. And it's fun at times just to forget our life and go back into the Word and just see what you are doing and speaking at different times and places, learning about you. Help us, Lord, not just to learn some information, but to engage with you. Touch us in our area of want, that our desire would be for you, that we would want to want you. If we're not wanting you now, we would at least have that desire to have a desire for you and to know you and to walk with you and be blessed by you. We thank you for this day. Open our eyes as we open the Bible in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so yeah, it's just me. Sorry. Kenny is speaking at a conference. So anyway, so I'm down into verse, and David's in the back with the young people. He's doing a 4-week thing on 4-week series with them. So it's me. And we are in Genesis chapter 46. And I want you to pay attention as we read today about look at some of God's goodness. How does that reflect on what we're seeing this morning? Now, you might have a lot of different thoughts, and that's okay. And we want to talk about whatever kind of enters our mind as we're reading this text. At the same time, I want to keep in mind the fact that the Lord is the main player in the Old Testament, the New Testament. Sometimes we miss him. We miss his kindness, his goodness. So if it's a man, for example, in the Gospels who's on the city center edge of Jericho and Jesus is leaving and that man wants to be healed, we'll oftentimes focus on his faith, persevering. If you know that story, through the obstacles, through the people telling him to shut up. But we never see the Lord there, thinking about the Lord, his compassion as he's heading to the cross and so much on his mind, and surrounding him a circus of people who just want, they probably see him as a circus entertainer doing one more miracle. His disciples don't get it. But with all that, with him ready to bear the sins of the world, he's taking time with one blind beggar that we don't even know his name, just son of Timaeus. We know his dad's name. So if we don't lose sight of Jesus in that moment, if you know what I'm saying. Now, we're not looking at that story. So we're back in the Old Testament. So with all these different people, and we get beautiful character development in the Old Testament, we don't want to lose sight of God and what we're learning about him, what we're seeing about him. So keep that in mind as we read through this. We're at the point of the story now where Jacob has revealed himself to his brothers. They went back home. They told their dad. Joseph sent carts so they could load up all their stuff on these trolleys and haul them back to Egypt. And so that's where we are now in this story. So this is going to begin a period of time for Jacob that will be 17 years of the end of his life. Now, I like time. I like timelines. I like to consider pieces of time. There's a few ways to do that. I've not talked at all about the dates of these events. When did these things fit into a calendar? That's a different time question. But there are lots of time questions in the text, and that is years that are marked. And I think that's a little more touchable and relatable. So we can debate over the exact dates of when these things took place. That's just another discussion. But when I see time and time factors, I'm always thinking of my life. I'm thinking if I go back, we've talked about Joseph, for example, 22 years until from the time he was sold as a slave until the time he revealed himself to his brothers, 22 years. And I like to think of 22 years in my own life. So I'll be 59 in about a couple of months. Some of you think, well, you're such a young spring chicken. Some of you might be thinking, man, you're old, dude. But minus 22, 59 minus 22 is 21 or something. What's that? 59, 22, 30, 37 years old. So where was I when I was 37? And imagine like making that a starting point all the way up to this point in my life. So I like to do that sort of a thing, to sort of imagine that length of an issue. So anyway, I do it because it helps to make some sense. And part of the reason I like to do that is if I would just, shut my gob, as they say in Scotland, and start reading, we could be through this book pretty quickly. So, but I like to talk. So these stories are not that long, but it's possible because it's quick to read, we lose a sense of the length of time that this was taking place and all that meant in these people's lives. To the things that they were learning about the Lord and what the Lord was doing for them. So in that last chapter, Joseph made that incredible statement that God had good intentions, even though his brothers' intentions were evil. And he spoke those words to them, your intentions were wicked. So Joseph was not afraid to put his finger on their wickedness, but also then on God's bigger intention of something to rescue. So to deliver. Easy statement to make. We like to lecture each other with that. Remember that God's up to something that you don't really realize. Yeah, this wasn't like a lecturing point. This is coming from a deep place of misery and pain that Joseph was able to say God was up to something larger. So let's start reading now. We're going to see how these people come down into this land. And this prophecy was made in Genesis 15 to Abraham that his descendants would go, that his relatives and family would go down into Egypt. And there they would be for 4 generations. So we're going to see that piece of this now fulfilled. They're leaving this promised land and they're going to be in Egypt. So Israel, it says in chapter 46, verse 1, set out with all that was his. When he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob. Here I am, he replied. Pause. When was the last time that Jacob heard from God in a vision? It was the night that he crossed the Jabbok River, leaving Laban. It's the last time we know of him having a vision or a dream of any kind. So that's been a significant amount of time. Now the Lord is speaking to him again. It's a very critical moment. I wonder if Jacob was thinking about, okay, Joseph is down there, but should I do this? Should I not? I remember that the Lord told my grandfather Abraham that we would go down into Egypt, but is this the moment? So that this is a very reassuring moment for the Lord to jump into the story here and to speak directly to Jacob. I am God, the God of your father, he said. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. Why would he say that unless Jacob was a little bit fearful of it? Not just his own safety, foreign land, but maybe he's stepping out of God's will because, they're supposed to stay in that land God promised, right? So do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. We're going to see they exit as a family of 75 people. They're going to exit Egypt later with about 2 million as a nation. I will go down to Egypt with you. Hey, there we go. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. I know we've got a lot more reading to do. I was talking with Ken last week. We were saying, what's the hurry? We're going to be back here next week, right? We're Christians. We come to church. So let's not just hurry. I mean, just pause there for a second. Pause. Here's this man. He still hasn't seen Joseph, remember. He's just been told that Joseph is still alive. His spirit is now revived. And the Lord speaks to him at this point about Joseph being the one that as he's dying, Joseph will put his hands right here. Just close his eyes. Okay, Dad.
The name Jacob and Israel kind of bounce back and forth here, but when God taught, even though his name has been changed to Israel, God refers to him as Jacob. What is their significance in that?
It's a great question. So the question is, the names, Jacob was his original name. The Lord changed it to Israel, but the Lord himself in this text keeps flip-flopping back and forth, Jacob, Israel. So should we pay attention to that or not? And I think it's too random from what I can see, and having looked at this, in my opinion, it's too random. And I've read some people that are trying to make a really big connection, but it just seems too random. It just seems almost synonymous. Okay, he's Jacob at this point, Israel at that point. In fact, even later on, much later on in the prophets, the Lord will refer to him as Jacob. The promise is made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Jeremiah and Ezekiel, for example. So the Lord is still referring to him as Jacob, but also as Israel. But imagine Jacob's fear not only being calmed by the Lord, that go down there, don't be afraid, but Joseph, your son is going to be the one to just, to close your eyes. So, what a beautiful thing, the moment we pass. There's one chance. We only have one go around here. You're going to pass it one time. And so here he's going to pass, and after all these years of trouble, it's going to be Joseph that'll be there as he goes. I mean, what a comforting word from the Lord. Then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's sons took their father Jacob and their children, their wives, and in the carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. So Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt, taking with them their livestock and possessions that they had acquired in Canaan. Jacob brought with him to Egypt, his sons and grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters, all his offspring. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob and his descendants who went to Egypt. Let's go down to verse. Okay. I'm so sorry, Lord. I'm sorry. I guess, are we supposed to read all? Billy, am I sinning? Billy, am I sinning if I don't read this right here? Tell me. Help me out. So you would read it. Okay, I'm going to go down to verse 25, okay? If you really want to know all their names and you want to watch me stumble through that as you're dozing off or sipping on more coffee, trying to wake up, you can do that. But I'm going to go down to verse 25. And it says, these were the sons born to Jacob by Bilhah, whom Laban had given to his daughter Rachel, 7 in all. So verse 26, all those who went to Egypt with Jacob, those who were his direct descendants, not counting his sons' wives, numbered 66 persons, with the 2 sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt. There were 70 in all. Now, if you're familiar with different places in the Bible, you know that when Stephen in the book of Acts is recounting the story, he says here in chapter 7, verse 14 of the book of Acts, after this, Joseph sent for his father Jacob, his whole family, 75 in all. Why does it say 70 there? He says 75. The book of Exodus, chapter 1, when the Lord was going to speak to Moses, the stage is being set here, reminding that Jacob went down as a family and they're going to leave as a nation. Big difference. And a tribal nation, might I add. A tribal nation. They were tribal people. These are the names, Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who went with them to Egypt. Blah, 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 blah. Down to verse 5. There's their names. Verse 5 it says. The descendants of Jacob numbered 75 in all. So even Exodus is saying 75. So more than likely, there's just a couple of people that weren't counted and were finally kind of counted back in. If you read the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation, they even correct the. I hate to say that word; it sounds like it's an error. But they say 75 persons in Genesis chapter 49, verse 26. So why is it there? Yes. Yeah, weren't being included. And it does say in here that they're not counting the sons' wives. Okay, why? So maybe because they were Canaanite, and so yeah, maybe yes, something we don't know exactly why, but there's 5 people not counted here that are counted later. So.
And 70 is a number of perfection, a number of perfection. So maybe there's a poetic license to help people remember this when reciting it oral tradition.
Yeah, maybe something of the poetry of it all. 70. There were 70 elders chosen that Moses would use later, and what? So sometimes these numbers have a little bit of a memory key for people to remember. So anyway, I don't see that there's a big issue there. It's not some issue with the text and there was an error and somebody later, probably just who they're counting and not counting. They've already said in verse 27 that they're not counting some people. Nonetheless, pay attention later on. We're not going to get there in the story, but in Exodus when they do leave, the thousands that are mentioned. For example, Manasseh, one of Joseph's sons, one son, is going to have 52,000 people under his tribal name. And so that's where you start doing the maths in Exodus, and you can come up with about 2 million people that left Egypt. So they're going in as a family, they're leaving as a nation. The whole feel of the Bible is going to change from a family story at the end of Genesis, close Genesis, open Exodus. You've had 400 years of silence in there, and it's going to open up as a nation. Again, a tribal nation, a tribal people. So now Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. Why did he just use Google Maps? Hey, Siri. So anyway, they didn't have Siri then, in case you were not aware. When they arrived in the region of Goshen, Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. He hasn't seen him yet. Here we go. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. What kind of emotions were in those tears? Thankfulness, right? Well, Jason, what was that? Yeah, so what? He thought he was dead for all those years. So what kind of a almost a disbelief that God would hope fulfilled, maybe you might say. The verse that Kenny was reading last week, with with hope and hope put off and hope realized. And yeah, probably a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of pain in there. There's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of gratitude to the Lord. There's an unbelief in these tears. There's, think about that, Doesn't tell us, but he's a human, so just an incredible moment. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." And the Lord's going to give him 17 more years to live, but he's ready to die. I can die peacefully, yeah. Sorry? He's complete. Yeah. Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and speak to Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and father's household who were living in the land of Canaan have come to me. These men are shepherds. They tend livestock, and they have brought along their flocks and herds and everything they own. When Pharaoh calls you in," I think this is a very funny thing. Now listen. Joseph is telling them, listen, here's the deal. Okay, so they have this big reunion. Everything's kind of happy. He says, "I'm going back to Pharaoh. I'm going to tell him you guys are here and that you're shepherds." Now, what he's going to do is he's going to tell them, basically, shut your mouth and you just follow the script, okay? I know how things work here. Don't start improving and feeling happy or feeling sad or complain. Just stick to the script, okay? So I think this is really, really, really kind of funny. I can remember George Verwer, the guy that started OM in kind of the late 1950s. We worked with OM for years, Operation Mobilization, and huge organization. If you've never heard of OM, probably 200,000 young people have gone through the program over the years, and it's kind of in every country and involved in all kinds of things. So when George Verwer was the guy that started it, and he was at Moody Bible College and believed that most of the people at Moody Bible College were not saved, and so he started baptizing people in showers, and they were holding all-night prayer meetings and going out and preaching in the streets, and believed God wanted them to do missions. That's go into all the world and make disciples and preach the gospel. So funny story, long story. I mean, one of the guys went over into Europe and he rang the guy up, Greg Livingston, and he called Greg, and they were 18, 19-year-old kids. He said, "Greg, I want you to charter a plane and put 250 young people on it." I'm sorry, George was in England at the time. He rang back up to Greg Livingston, a friend of his that they've been praying with. "Charter a plane and come to the UK, and we're going to do like a buzz tour of Europe and UK and evangelism and outreach. So put 250 young people on it." Click, hangs the phone up. Greg Livingston went along. They got 250 young people on that airplane, and off they went. Greg Livingston eventually left Operation Mobilization, as is the story of many, and started another organization called Frontiers. I know I'm speaking mission language at this time, and I'm sure none of you are familiar with any of this. But Frontiers is a large ministry that is devoted to nothing but church planting among Muslim people. So Greg Livingston got his teeth cut with George Verwer way back in the day. Greg Livingston is probably 65, 70 years old today. So this is all going on in the last, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2010s up till today. So, 50, 60 years now of history of what I'm telling you here. But George, back in the early days, he's quite a fox, So he got all these young people. A group of them went down to Mexico to share the gospel. And he said, "Look, when we get to the border, shut your mouths. Let me do all the talking." So he said, "I'll address the border people. Okay, you just be quiet. I know what to say." So I know it sounds crazy, but I just think it's very funny. You do get yourself in these situations at times where you need somebody just to say, "Look, here's what you say. Here's your script. Say nothing more. Don't vary it." Billy, what's you up?
Well, it don't mention it here, but Jacob had to ask his other brother, "Why did you tell me you were dead?" He had to ask that question.
Yeah. You wonder how much.
I wonder what their answer would be. They don't say, but that conversation went on.
Yeah, you wonder. So how much did they talk about? How much was corrected at this moment? How much was brought up? How much was just unspoken?
How much was
How much was admitted? How much was just unspoken? Remember, these are not American people. And our desire to cathart and to kind of get it all out on the table is not the desire of the world. Even to today, it's not. Sometimes it's the actions you do that demonstrate that corrections are made. So that's why I asked previously, do you ever see anybody in this text coming to the other person saying, I sinned against you, will you forgive me? And the other person says, I forgive you. So you can assume that that might have happened, but it might not have happened. It's purely an assumption. It might simply be through the actions. And we're going to see a little bit later in the story, if you guys know the story, once Jacob dies, what do the brothers do? You guys know the story well? They come to Jacob and they say, since Dad's gone and you're kind of big and powerful, can you promise you won't kill us? And Joseph said, forget it, come on. So you have these moments there where there's reconciling moments, but it's action orientated. It's not words. So did they talk about this or did they not? Was it something that they had already had a conversation about that Jacob had already talked with his sons about back in Canaan, or did he just sit there looking at them, think, "Phew, can't believe this." Yes. Yeah, we read that earlier, right, in the text. So back to this thing of let me talk to Pharaoh for you, because he's going to hear your shepherds, and they won't associate with you because you're shepherds. You're kind of unclean to the royalty, which is like God, Pharaoh, and what in the Egyptian royalty. So yeah. Okay, so your servants have tended flocks. So here's when Pharaoh calls you in and asks you, what is your occupation? In other words, he knows he's going to ask, right? You should answer this: your servants have tended flocks from our boyhood on. So don't get into all your other trade deals that you do. Just say you tend flocks, all right? I'm down to verse 34. So, as our fathers did, then you will be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen. And all shepherds are detestable to Egyptians. Well, there we have it, right? Yeah, in the text. All right, chapter 47. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Good. Well, I don't know. You mean Abraham with Pharaoh? Did Abraham lie? He told the truth. Right, but is that part of our American thing where we feel like we've got to kind of come clean on everything, whereas he came clean. She's my sister. He's just right, but perhaps, yeah. It was self-preserving, for sure. It was self-preserving, right? But Dick, that's a great question, because I do think there's something within our American culture where we're truth tellers. We struggle with just straightness, and boy, I hesitate to say anything. There's a recent president in this country that understands this way of acting internationally, and I think the American public hasn't come to terms with that yet. He's very cunning, and he knows how other people work. So this is a previous president we had. So where he had a picture of the leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and the reason that we didn't see any more American soldiers die in Afghanistan is because he called that leader and said, "I've got a nice picture of your house right here, and all your wives and stuff. You guys, you like life? You want to die? You'd like to live? Whoa, don't do that." He says, "Well, I don't want to see any more American soldiers dead in Afghanistan." And it stopped. So, there's kind of a way, in other words, I'm kind of saying here is that sometimes, we pick up, I'm thinking about things just with Abraham. Did he lie? But he's sticking with the script. It was very self-preserving, Abraham's comment. And so Joseph is trying, I think, to get his brothers to just, if they start to talk about that they do trade, which they did, because they met the, what were they called there? They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelite traders who were passing through, and they brought him down to Egypt. So they must have had other business and trade they did. So he's trying to get them just to stick with that thing of just say you're shepherds. Are you shepherds? Yeah, we're shepherds, and then off they go. Yeah.
But he uses it in other areas, it's not favorable. And that's the same with the brothers, and the self-preservation is a window into what they really are like, not just that one.
Right, and I would say that's partly our American culture that doesn't appreciate that. We don't value that sense of cunning. We don't, as Americans, we don't value that. That's part of a cultural value thing. So in the scriptures, Abraham, he's never faulted for lying to Pharaoh. He's just, it's a very self-preserving comment. It is, and it gets him in trouble. And I'm sure it left Sarah out to hang to dry, and I'm sure she didn't appreciate that. So I'm not avoiding that part of it. But there's something there where he's also, let me say this, being an American, I mean, I'm not saying this is a bad value, I'm just saying it's part of what we value. If I had gone to see Pharaoh, I'd just say, this is Sarah, she's my sister and my wife. Her daddy and my daddy were brothers, and, okay, so you kind of get the picture, there you go. So, but he doesn't do that. He's thinking of how to kind of, save himself, not trusting the Lord, maybe. He should have just trusted God, but maybe a little different here, but maybe something akin to that, Dick. Where he's trying to maybe shut down his brothers saying too much, and it starts to create a problem because he wants to get them down to Goshen. It's good land. He wants to settle them there, and Pharaoh will agree that if they're shepherds, they can go live there because there's good land still in this famine. There's good land there for their sheep and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. My own comments on that. Yeah, there's no threat there. Yeah, the little more straightforward people, taking care of the animals, farmer types that are a bit more nomadic or whatever, but yeah, less of a threat, yeah.
And he may have not wanted them to come off close, like, oh, we can do this, just kind of, hey, I've humbled myself to Pharaoh, you're guests in this land, you're not the greatest. You have to come here because you can't survive.
Yeah. So he's trying to look out for them again. It's a preserving comment for his brothers. I'm trying to do something good here. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, are we good? Okay, we'll roll on. Chapter 47. So Joseph went and told Pharaoh, "My father and brothers are here with their flocks and herds and everything they own." By the way, remember, don't forget the Lord. Don't forget the Lord's hand working through Joseph at this time. Okay? Remember, there's famine all over the land. Remember, they're leaving a land that they can't survive in anymore, Canaan, and they're coming down to Egypt, which also is experiencing famine, but there's a piece of this land that's because of the river, because of its soil and the soil level in relation to the Nile River, it's very fertile. So think about the Lord's provision for them through Joseph at this moment, right? Not just to let them come down to Egypt and be like everybody else, but he's going to give them the best. My father and brothers with their flocks and herds and everything they own have come from the land of Canaan and are in Goshen. He chose 5 of his brothers and presented them before Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked his brothers, "What is your occupation?" Shazam! He knew the question was going to come, didn't he? "Your servants are shepherds," they replied, "just as our fathers were." So they also said to him, "Oh no, watch it. Don't say anything extra. We have come to live here for a while because the famine is severe in Canaan and your servants' flocks have no pasture. So now, please let your servants settle in Goshen." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land, and let them live in Goshen. And if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock." Whoa, okay. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob, that's and presented him before Pharaoh. So now that's that first deal settled. Now he wants him to meet his dad. And this we'll see if we get much further than this part of the story at this point. But just sometimes again we're familiar with the story, so don't lose sight of this. This is a big, powerful man. He's not only the powerful leader of Egypt, he believes he's a god, and so do all the people. So it's quite a it's quite an appearing to come in before him. So just meeting people of power. It's interesting how we who don't really have any power sometimes become intimidated. Now, some of you may not. There's a guy called Harry Dent. Harry Dent worked under Richard Nixon. This is going back a ways. I met Harry Dent in South Carolina. And he was saying the one time that he used to arrange for people to meet President Nixon. Anybody ever heard of that name? Some of you know the name, right? Some of you, we had a president called Nixon. Yeah. So anyway, a little bit of his American history. But he said it was interesting because people, back then you write a letter, right? I'd like to meet the president and speak my mind on this topic, and he'd read that and think, this is really good. The president needs to hear this. So he'd arrange for an appointment, send a letter back, and up they come up to Washington, D.C. He said time and time and time again, you see people come in and they finally meet the president, and they're in the Oval Office. They've only seen in the newspapers pictures of this stuff, and they're just overwhelmed. The president sits down with them and says, what would you like me to hear? What do you want to say? And they say, well, we're Christian people. We're praying for you. I just want to let you know you're doing a great job for the country. And Harry would say he'd sit there and just melt inside. Oh, I can't say it. You have to say it. You're the one that wrote the letter. You're the citizen that's coming up here. So I'm just saying, his point sort of was how in the presence of big people, we who are not kind of used to that, we tend to melt quickly. We kind of lose all of our gumption. So this is a big moment. Joseph is used to coming in and out of Pharaoh's presence, but here now the brothers have kind of come and gone and making them stick to the script, and off they go. Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him before Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked him, how old are you? So Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my pilgrimage are 130. He's going to live to be how old? 147. So he's going to have 17 years of time to live here and be blessed in that land, knowing that his son is alive and seeing his grandchildren. He's got a lot ahead of him now, but he's meeting Pharaoh. At this point, 130 years old. How many of you would like to live to be 130? Hey, sometimes I do. Sometimes I think of all these things I'd like to do, I think I need about 150 years of life. But anything. But sometimes you just want to get out of here too, don't you? Let's get on with the next thing. We know we got something better with the Lord.
Before we get too far, Jacob blesses Pharaoh.
Yes, that's going to come up in just a moment. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. The years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers. So his grandfather and father, right, Abraham and Isaac, lived much longer. 175 years and I think 185 years they lived to be, respectively. So he's saying, he's 130, and he's pretty well beaten up from a tough life. Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. Yeah, that's the point Bill's making here. Think about that. Think about that. Anything you want to say further on that one, Bill? Or someone else want to?
Doesn't that mean that he basically said a kind word or
Or he said farewell to.
a kind exhortation or something of that? It doesn't mean he gave him riches or wealth or material. It's just a kind greeting or exhortation.
Yeah, I think blessing him with his words for sure. Yeah, not that he brought like riches and finance and things like that. Yeah, good points. This isn't like a financial gift of any kind. Not that he's got some intention of bribery. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's, if I'm catching your words, Sam, it's not the financial side of it. There's something here of him blessing. Yes.
Now, really interesting to look at the historical and cultural, like Egypt, like you said, Pharaoh, he was a god. I mean, he was sent from their God to rule people, and everyone believed that. And when Pharaoh let them come into the land, he didn't force them to change their religion. He knew that they practiced another religion, and he was fine with that. And I think that there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Not having them, I mean, it never really says they bow down to them or
Yeah.
force them. He blessed them as well.
Yeah.
And by Jacob saying he blessed, we don't know what that means, but it didn't say that Pharaoh said, well, I don't need blessings, I'm a God. I don't need my blessings.
Yeah. Yeah, in a sense, Pharaoh is blessing them by letting them come, take that land. Here again, there's nothing he's giving physically back, but the sense, to Ken's point, the fact that there's he's not forcing them to become Egyptian and follow the Egyptian way of life and the religion of Egypt. He's allowing them to be Hebrews and worship the God of their ancestors down in Goshen. Yes. Yes, absolutely, BJ. So that's part of what I was going to jump on here in just a minute. The greater blesses the lesser, right? Where is the story in Genesis? We read of that, and then the text itself comments that the greater blesses the lesser. Hebrews picks up on a story in the Old Testament, and the writer of Hebrews says, remember, the greater one blesses the lesser one. That's the story of? Okay, Jacob and Esau is one, right? Okay, Melchizedek? The story of Melchizedek, Genesis chapter 13, Abraham went out to fight with 350 trained men. He defeated 5 kings. Wow, think about that. And those men were in his household. Think about the wealth of his household, having 350 trained militiamen. They defeated, and as they're coming back, he meets this person we know nothing about. We don't know his genealogy. We don't know where he went after the story. He's called the King of Peace. The King of Peace comes to Abraham and blesses Abraham. And Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything that he owned. And the writer of Hebrews comments that was we might say a Christophany. You ever heard that word? Pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. A theophany, some might say, pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, where Christ is coming and blessing Abraham. That's what the writer of Hebrews says about that man Melchizedek. But Melchizedek, by blessing Abraham, makes him greater than Abraham. That's the point of the writer of Hebrews. So, yeah. So even though this is the king of Egypt, considers himself to be a god, Jacob is blessing him. And I think there's something a little more here than him just respecting Jacob's age. Oh, he's an older man. Culturally, I'll be kind and let him bless me because he's an older man. That would be very normal in the East. In Africa and probably in Latin America and probably in our Southern culture where if you still have any of that good part of the culture still within your families and you're taught to respect older people, right? So this seems like something a little more than that. There's something more. So yeah, the greater one blesses the lesser one. And think about this: if this is Pharaoh, the king and leader and God of Egypt, and Jacob is blessing him. Wow. Yes.
Pharaoh has already had a brush with God, with the real God, through Joseph.
Yeah.
Dream.
Yeah.
Joseph said, God.
Yeah.
And now this is God's people. I think Pharaoh knows he's not a God.
Okay, so Bill, you're kind of starting to really touch on what is really critical here of learning about the Lord, right? And the Lord's graciousness toward Pharaoh. So, the points, again, I like to repeat things for folks at home, and they do say, hey, thumbs up, appreciate you repeating things because they can't quite hear your questions. But the point that Bill is making is that Pharaoh has already encountered the Lord. through Joseph, because of the beginning with that interpretation of the dream, that there's going to be 7 years of good times, 7 years of famine. And he looked at Joseph and thought, there's something of the holy gods within this man. There's something there, and his God has predicted this, and all this came true. So this wasn't just a vain dream prophecy thing that never came true. All of it came true. And so from Pharaoh's perspective, by meeting Joseph, seeing that he's qualified for his position, not just because he's got qualifications, but there's something kind of magic within him. He can interpret the dreams from his gods. There's something a little bit spooky about Joseph, about reverencing Joseph and Joseph's God, that it's Joseph's God that gave the interpretation, and not only the interpretation, but the way forward for his people in Egypt to survive. And at this point, he's becoming wealthy, and his nation is, and they're going to become really wealthy as the story goes on. So yeah, he's already had this encounter with God. So meeting this holy kind of guru aura, he's got some kind of aura, I'm sure, he sees around Joseph, right? And now he's meeting his dad. He must be feeling like the power is even bigger, right? Or something. I get to meet one of the ancestors from this man's way and his God. So, I mean, just keep that in mind. I don't know. Think about now the Lord himself manifesting himself through, Bill, good point. I think before we jump on, we ought to think about that for a bit. All that Pharaoh is experiencing of God's goodness, and now Jacob, the dad of this holy man, is there. And so maybe he wanted blessing from him. Yeah, maybe he's realizing, I'm not a God at all compared to this God. Who is your God? Bless me. So, yes. Sam, yeah.
Strong definition says, rock is the Hebrew word, means to needle.
To needle. For bless. Yeah. And I think in the context of Genesis, you're going to see Jacob a little bit later bless his children, and that blessing is going to be carrying prophecy. So I'm saying that because I think we should see this as a little more than just like he said some kind words. Oh, Pharaoh, you're so sweet. You're such a sweetheart. You've been so good to my son Joe and all of us. What can we say? Oh, God bless you. God bless you. And then he walks away, and that was his blessing. When you see what he does in Genesis 50, he's going to prophesy over his children. And from there, we're going to see him prophesy over Judah, and Judah's going to be the one that's going to be in the line of the Messiah. He's going to say so. He's going to tell Judah, the Messiah is going to come through your line in Genesis. So, are you with me there? I haven't lost you, have I? There's something big in blessing when Jacob is blessing, is what I'm trying to say. This isn't just I'm saying that with to sort of say it's more than that. It's more than just, oh, God bless you kind of a thing. So something here. Yeah. Oh, we're at 10:20. Any other thoughts there? We'll wrap it up. Anything else, Billy?
I don't say it had to do with this vessel. Before they were buried was very important to them. Us, we don't care.
Yeah.
Before they were buried was very important to them.
Yeah. That's going to come up a bit later. Jacob wants to be buried back in his homeland, doesn't he? Yeah. Well, hey, isn't that amazing? Let me just finish with a word of prayer. But think about the Lord's goodness toward even the Egyptians. We tend to think of our own, but God is being good to people that don't know Him here. He's showing His kindness and His favor and goodness, and He's very much that way. He's a very gracious and kind God. Yeah. Yeah. Very true. He's very kind and good toward people that don't go to church or don't know Him or anything. He's not only kind to the believer. It is. And boy, is that a sermon. Acts chapter 13, Acts chapter 17. That's exactly what Paul preaches. God has been very kind to all of you and showing you so much goodness through providing for your physical needs and giving you abundance and stuff to eat every day. Now you need to turn to Him is kind of Paul's point. Billy, I'm going to pray. We're already past 10:20. But Lord, thanks so much this morning for this text again. We thank You for the Bible. And it's so amazing to read these stories and we see Your kindness and favor toward this older man, Jacob, giving him such an incredible moment of tears where there's a turning point there, and we see Your favor toward Pharaoh and Your kindness. Lord, we thank You for Your incredible kindness. None of us in here have gone hungry this last week. You've filled our bellies with good food. You've given us things in spite of the difficulties. You're very faithful and kind in your abundance and to all of us. You're kind to our nation. You're kind to the nations generally, Lord. Even those that don't know you, even those that turn away from you, you're still kind. You're still good. We praise you, Lord. Open our eyes as we open the Bible in this next hour. In Jesus' name, amen.
What I was going to
Best book